The day a little girl I'd never seen before called me grandma, I almost closed the door in her face. Not because she did anything wrong, not because she wasn't sweet, but because in that split second, it felt like my whole life had been rewritten without anyone bothering to tell me. Grandma, she said again, clutching a little pink backpack to her chest. Are you Miss Lorraine? Her voice was small, but it carried straight through my front porch and all the way back through 57 years of trying to raise a son right. The late afternoon air in Savannah was thick and humid. Even in September, and somewhere down the block a dog was barking like it knew some secret I didn't. I stared at this child, brown skin a shade lighter than mine, tight puffs pulled into two crooked ponytails, big dark eyes that held too much hope for a stranger's doorstep. Yes, baby, I heard myself say, though my mouth had gone dry. I'm Lorraine. Who are you? She seemed almost relieved, like I had passed a test. I'm Amaya, she said. Daddy said if I ever got lost or scared, I could come to my grandma's house. Daddy, that word punched a hole right through my chest. I gripped the edge of the door with one hand, steadying myself. The house smelled like what I'd been doing just a few minutes earlier. Fried catfish, still warm in the pan, and the faint lemon of the cleaner I'd used on the kitchen counters. The TV in the living room was still talking to no one. Some rerun game show buzzing in the background. It had been a normal day, a quiet day, until a little girl turned my whole life sideways. If you're hearing this right now, I said softly, more to you listening than to her, no matter where you are, washing dishes, trying to fall asleep, maybe riding the bus to a job you're tired of, I want you to think about something. What would you do if a stranger's child stood on your doorstep and called you grandma? If anything in this story feels familiar, I want you to tell me in the comments, because I know I'm not the only one who's lived through secrets like this. And if you're still here with me, go ahead and tap that like button so more folks can hear how this unfolds. I took a breath, feeling my heartbeat slow enough for me to think. Amaya, I repeated. What's your daddy's name, baby? Jamal, she answered, with the kind of certainty only children have. Jamal Brooks. He said you make the best pancakes in the world. My fingers went numb. That was my son's full name, my only child, and I knew right then that whatever I thought I knew about my son's life, I didn't know nearly enough. Come on in, I told her, opening the door wider. Let's get you some water and figure out what's going on. She stepped past me, small sneakers squeaking against the hardwood I'd mopped that morning. As she walked in, the coolness from the air conditioner wrapped around her. I noticed a faint smell of crayons and kid shampoo clinging to her clothes. Her backpack, I saw now, had a tiny rip along one strap, stitched back up with clumsy blue thread. I closed the door behind her, leaning against it for just 1 second longer than necessary. Because to understand that moment, I have to tell you what life looked like before Maya showed up on my doorstep, calling me grandma, like it was the most natural thing in the world. For the past 5 years, my life had been quiet in a way that was both comforting and lonely. I lived in a small, cream-colored house on the east side of Savannah, the same house I'd inherited from my mama. A magnolia tree out front dropped leaves in my yard faster than my knees let me rake them, and the porch swing still creaked the way it did when my husband, Howard, and I used to sit outside in the evenings. Howard had been gone 7 years now. Heart attack, sudden and cruel. 1 minute he was complaining about the price of gas. The next minute he was slumped over in his recliner with the football game still playing. I had been the one to scream. I had been the one to ride in the ambulance, thinking they'd somehow bring him back. They didn't. After the funeral, people came by with casseroles and pound cakes, murmuring things like, If you need anything, just call. But time passes and phone calls slow and people get back to their own lives. Except a mother never really gets back to anything. She just keeps going. I work part-time at a little bakery on Habersham, rolling biscuits before sunrise and filling to-go orders for tourists who thought sweet tea was something special. The smell of yeast and coffee clung to my clothes no matter how many times I washed them. It was tiring, but it kept my hands busy and my mind from wandering too far. When I wasn't working, my days had their own rhythm. I'd get up early even on my days off. My joints didn't like the bed after 6 a.m. anyway. I'd make myself a bowl of grits, maybe an egg if I felt fancy, and sit in the same kitchen chair I'd sat in for decades, sunlight creeping across the tablecloth as the morning moved on. Sometimes I'd flip through channels until I landed on some old rerun, something I'd seen 100 times. The familiarity soothed me, like an old song you don't need to listen closely to in order to feel comforted. And of course, there was Jamal, my boy. He'd been my North Star since the day I brought him home from the hospital in a blanket that was more frayed than soft. I had been 20 when I had him, working nights at a diner, while his father, well, let's just say his father was gone long before Howard ever came along. Howard loved Jamal like he was his own from the minute they met, and I always said God gave me one good man to make up for the first. Jamal had grown up into the kind of man other women complimented me on. You raised him right, they'd say, watching him carry groceries for Miss Evelyn next door without being asked. He stayed mostly out of trouble, went to community college, then started working in HVAC, air conditioning and heating, which in Georgia meant he was never out of work. He called me every Sunday, almost like church. Even when life got busy, he'd at least send a text. You good, Ma? He'd swing by once or twice a month for a plate of food, acting like he was doing me a favor by helping me eat all this, but I knew he needed my cooking as much as I needed to see his face. So if you'd asked me a week before Amaya appeared, how's Jamal? I would have said he's working hard, he's busy, you know how men are. He'll settle down when he's ready. What I wouldn't have told you is that something had started to feel off. It began small. Little things like hairline cracks in a glass you didn't know was fragile. A few months earlier, I'd asked him on the phone, you seeing anybody special? He'd gone quiet for a beat too long. Nah, Ma, he'd said eventually, with a short laugh that sounded forced. You know me. I'm married to this job. I remember wiping the counter with a dishcloth while he talked, noticing a smear of barbecue sauce that wouldn't quite come off. I didn't push him. Jamal didn't like being interrogated about his personal life, and I'd learned over the years that too many questions made him shut down. Still, I had eyes. I saw the way he started wearing nicer cologne, the way he checked his phone more when he came over, smiling at messages he didn't share, the way he once left my house in a hurry because someone needed him and refused to say who. One Sunday after church, I sat beside Miss Evelyn on her porch while we fanned ourselves with church bulletins. She narrowed her eyes like she was reading between the lines of my face. You worried about that boy of yours, she said. It wasn't a question. I hesitated. He just seems different, secretive. And you know how I raised him, Evelyn. We don't do secrets in this family. She gave a little hum. You say that, Lorraine. But you remember how you used to talk about them girls he brought home? Skirt too short, nails too long, family too messy. I frowned. I just want better for him. She looked at me over the top of her glasses. Sometimes better starts to sound like nobody's good enough. Boys hear that. I didn't respond. Instead, I watched my son's truck drive past the corner, heading away from my house instead of toward it that afternoon. I told myself he was just busy. If you've ever felt that shift with someone you love, like the air changes when they walk in the room, like they're suddenly holding a whole story behind their eyes, you know what I mean. It's not always one big moment. Sometimes it's a series of small silences. There was the time I called and heard a child laughing in the background, high and sweet. Who's that? I asked, smiling instinctively. I love children. I always imagined I'd have at least 3, but life had other plans. Just the TV, he said quickly. Too quickly. Cartoon on in the background. Listen, Ma, I'll call you back. The call ended before I could say another word. There was the time he canceled dinner with me at the last minute. Something came up, he texted. Rain check. Everything okay? I replied, yeah, just tired. Tired. That vagueness irritated me more than if he'd just told me the truth. Whatever that truth was. I found myself scrolling through his social media one evening, glasses perched on my nose, thumb moving slower than my mind. Not much there. A picture of his work boots. A plate of ribs from a place downtown. One picture of him at some cookout, standing beside a woman I didn't recognize. Her face turned just enough that I couldn't see her clearly. They weren't touching, but the way they stood near each other, it made my stomach tighten. I clicked the photo, trying to zoom in, but it was too blurry. Her hair was long and curly, pulled back in a loose ponytail, and she had a tattoo on her forearm. I could hear my own voice in my head, the way I had talked about girls like that when Jamal was younger. She looked fast. All that ink and hair. You need a lady who comes from a good family, you hear me? Someone who knows how to carry herself. I had said things like that, thinking I was protecting him, keeping him from the kind of chaos my own mama had watched me run into as a teenager. Now, staring at that photo, I wondered what that woman would think if she heard the things I'd said about girls like her. I put the phone down, wiped my hands on my apron though they weren't dirty, and told myself to stop being nosy. But see, here's the thing. The truth doesn't stop existing just because we decide not to look at it. So when Amaya showed up at my house that Tuesday afternoon wearing a shirt with tiny glitter hearts and carrying secrets my son hadn't trusted me with, it wasn't really the beginning of the story. It was just the first time the secrets had a face. She sat on my sofa, legs swinging above the floor as I brought her a glass of water. The condensation tracked a thin line down my fingers, and I felt absurdly grateful for something to hold. Something solid. Thank you, she said, careful hands around the glass. Daddy always says I gotta use 2 hands with cups, so I don't spill. He's right, I murmured, my chest tight around that word again. Daddy? Where's your daddy now? I asked. How'd you get here, baby? She took a small sip of water, her lips leaving a faint print on the rim. He went to work, she said. He said he'd be back before it got dark. He dropped me at Miss Tanya's house, but her boyfriend started shouting, and I didn't like it. She looked down at her shoes. I remember Daddy showing me your house one time. He said, if you ever feel scared and I'm not there, you can come here. This is Grandma's house. My throat closed. Does your mom know you're here? I asked, keeping my voice soft. She shrugged, a little too old a gesture for such a small frame. She's at work too. She works a lot. At the hospital. She does nights sometimes. I stay with Miss Tanya, but today her boyfriend was mad and he threw a plate and it broke. Her eyes flicked up to mine, worried. I'm not supposed to tell, but I got scared. She wasn't just telling me where she'd been. She was telling me what kind of life my granddaughter, had been living while I sat in my house baking pound cake and worrying about nothing but my own loneliness. I didn't know anything about this child. What she liked. What scared her. If she had allergies. If she preferred waffles to pancakes. If she'd ever been to church. I didn't know what her laugh sounded like when she was really happy. Amaya, I said slowly, feeling her name settle on my tongue. How old are you? 7, she said, holding up 7 fingers, just in case I thought she might be lying. 7. Jamal had been hiding a whole human being from me for 7 years. The air conditioner hummed softly in the corner. Outside, A lawnmower started up somewhere down the block. Inside, my whole world narrowed to the small girl sitting on my couch. Baby, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, do you know my son? Do you know your daddy's last name? She giggled like I'd told a joke. Brooks, she said. Same as yours. Daddy said I got his last name, 'cause he wanted me to always remember I got family, even if people don't like us. That last sentence went through me like a knife. Even if people don't like us. What people? I asked, more sharply than I meant to. She flinched a little, and I softened my tone. Hey now, I'm not mad at you, okay? Grandma's not mad. I just want to understand. She looked at me, really looked, like she was trying to weigh how much truth I could handle. Mommy says some people don't like her, she said quietly, 'cause she got tattoos, and 'cause of things she did before I was born. She says Daddy's family is proper. She wrinkled her nose at the word, mimicking how it probably sounded when her mama said it. She says they wouldn't want us around. But Daddy said you might be different. He just wasn't ready. I sat back slowly, my spine pressing into the worn cushion of my chair. Proper. Wouldn't want us around. I heard my own voice echoing down the years. I don't want no girl with a record around my child. I don't want no mess. You hear me, Jamal? We got standards. Had I said those words in front of him? Yes. Had I said them around him when some story came on the news? Yes. Had I meant well? Also yes. Intentions don't always soften an impact. I thought about my son, trying to balance me on one side and this woman and child on the other, like carrying two fragile plates on a tray. If he believed I would look down on them, had I really given him any reason to believe otherwise? Would you like me to continue? Isn't something I can ask you in real life. Life just keeps going, whether you're ready or not. So I'll tell you what happened next. I pulled my phone from my pocket, fingers suddenly clumsy, and scrolled to Jamal's number. My thumb hovered over the call button for a moment. I could feel Amaya's eyes on me, wide and trusting. Does Daddy know you're here? I asked her. She nodded. I texted him from Miss Tanya's phone when I left. I told him I was going to Grandma's house. He sent me the little thumbs up. She lifted her own thumb in demonstration. Like this. So he knew. He knew his daughter was on my porch. He knew and he hadn't called. I pressed the call button. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Come on, Jamal, I muttered under my breath. Pick up this phone, boy. On the 4th ring, he answered. Hey, Ma, he said, sounding tired. In the background, I heard a faint metallic clink, like tools hitting a workbench. I'm at a job. Everything okay? You tell me, I said, my voice low and steady in a way that made him fall silent on the other end. You forget to mention something to me? There was a pause, long enough for me to hear my own breath in my ear. Ma, he said slowly, voice tightening, what's going on? I looked over at Amaya, who was watching me with the solemn curiosity children get when adults start using that careful voice. A little girl just knocked on my door, I said. She said her name is Amaya. She said her daddy is named Jamal Brooks. She's sitting on my sofa right now, calling me Grandma. You want to explain to me how I can have a grandbaby old enough to drink a whole glass of water in my living room, and you ain't never thought to mention her? On the other end of the line, I heard him exhale like he'd been punched. Ma, he whispered. She's there. Where else would she be? I snapped, then immediately regretted the sharpness when I saw Maya's shoulders curl inward a little. I softened my tone but not my message. Yes. She's here. She walked over here by herself because she was scared where she was. So before you say another word, you need to answer me this. Is she safe with me? Yes, he said quickly, no hesitation. Yes, Ma. She's safe with you. I didn't know she was going to actually, he broke off, and I heard something clatter in the background. I'll be there as soon as I can. Give me 40 minutes, okay? I'll give you 30, I replied. Your child is here. And we're gonna talk, Jamal. We're gonna talk like we should have talked 7 years ago. I hung up before he could answer. Amaya was watching me, chewing on her bottom lip. Am I in trouble? She asked. Daddy's gonna be mad I left Miss Tanya's without telling her. My heart pinched. No, baby, I said, crossing the room to sit beside her. The couch cushion dipped a little under my weight, and she leaned subtly toward me like a plant reaching for sunlight. You're not in trouble. You were brave. Sometimes being brave means going where you feel safe, even if people don't like how you did it. She smiled tentatively. You're really my grandma? I could have said, well, your daddy didn't bother to tell me about you, so I don't know how real anything is. I could have used that moment to feed my anger, my sense of betrayal. Instead, I looked at her face, at the little dimple near her left cheek that matched the one Jamal had when he was her age, at the way she held her hands in her lap, fingers laced together just like I did in church when I was nervous. Yes, I said slowly, feeling the word anchor itself inside me. I am. I'm your grandma, baby. Whether I knew it yesterday or not, that doesn't change today. She beamed. It was like watching a light being turned on in a room I hadn't known was dark. Can I see pictures of Daddy when he was little? She asked. Mommy keeps asking for them, but Daddy always says he forgot to bring him. I felt the anger in my chest twist into something more complicated. Yeah, I said, standing. Yeah, I got plenty of pictures of that boy with his head too big for his little body. You want to see? She giggled, the sound bright and sharp like wind chimes. As I went to the hallway closet to pull down the old photo albums, dust motes floating in the air where the light caught them, my mind raced ahead to the conversation that was coming. Jamal was going to walk through my front door soon, carrying 7 years of secrets on his shoulders, and I was going to have to decide whether I wanted to cling to my pride or open my arms. We set the album on the coffee table, the cracked leather cover familiar under my fingertips. I flipped it open and watched Amaya lean in, breath catching when she saw a picture of Jamal at about 8, missing his front teeth, grinning up at the camera with barbecue sauce all over his face. He looks like me, she squealed, pointing. Look, same smile. I smiled despite myself. He sure does. He used to climb that magnolia tree out front until I thought I was going to have to nail his feet to the ground to keep him from breaking his neck. She laughed, eyes flicking from the page to the window where that same tree still stood, taller now, branches heavier. Did he get lots of whoopings? She asked, whispered like she was asking about contraband. I chuckled softly. Not as many as he deserved, but enough to keep him mostly straight. She grew serious then, tracing the edge of the photograph with one small finger. I'm glad he had you, she said. Mommy says some people don't have good moms. The words landed heavier than she knew. I looked at this tiny person beside me, a person who had my last name, my blood, my son's eyes, and I realized something I'm almost ashamed to admit. Part of my hurt, sitting there, wasn't just that Jamal had hidden her. It was that he hadn't believed I could love her, that he hadn't trusted me enough to give me the chance. And somewhere beneath all my righteous anger, I knew I had helped build that fear in him. The front door opened without a knock. Jamal still had a key, and the air shifted in that way it does when someone familiar walks into a room. Ma, he called, voice tighter than usual. Amaya. Amaya's face lit up. Daddy, she cried, sliding off the couch and running toward the hall. He appeared in the doorway, wearing his work shirt with Jamal stitched above the pocket, work boots unlaced, forehead shining with sweat. When he saw her, relief washed over his face so fast it almost undid me. He dropped to his knees and caught her in his arms, holding her so tight she squealed. You can't just leave Miss Tanya's without telling nobody, he said, voice shaking. You scare me half to death, little girl. I was scared, she said into his shoulder. He was yelling. You said I could come to Grandma's house if I was scared. He closed his eyes for a second, the muscles in his jaw clenching. I know, he murmured. I know. You did good coming here. But next time you call me first, okay? Don't just walk by yourself. You gotta be careful. She nodded, and he kissed the top of her head, holding her for one more moment before slowly standing, keeping a hand on her shoulder like he needed to feel her to believe she was real. Then his eyes met mine. Hey, Ma, he said quietly. I crossed my arms over my chest, the photo album still open on the table beside us, his childhood staring back at him. Hey, I repeated. That's all you got for me? Hey, Ma. He swallowed. Can we talk in private? No, I said. We can talk right here. Because whatever this is, whatever you've been hiding, it wasn't private when you brought a whole child into this world. And it sure wasn't private when she had to walk herself to my house because she felt safer with a stranger than where you left her. His shoulders slumped. He looked smaller, somehow, than the man I'd always seen. Not because he was weak, but because he was carrying something heavy. Maya, he said gently, taking her hand. Why don't you go wash your hands in the bathroom, okay? Then you can come back and see more pictures of me looking crazy when I was your age. She looked between us, sensing the tension even if she didn't understand its shape. You're not going to fight, are you? She asked. My heart cracked. No, baby, I said quickly. We're just going to have a grown folks talk. Nobody's yelling. Right, Jamal? He shook his head. Right, he said hoarsely. No yelling. Satisfied, she scampered down the hall, the bathroom light flicking on, the sound of running water filling the brief silence between us. We stood there in my living room, mother and son, with 7 years of words we should have said piled up at our feet. I broke the silence first. You want to tell me why I had to meet my grandbaby by accident? I asked. Why she had to introduce herself to me on my own porch like a Girl Scout selling cookies. He winced. Ma, no, don't ma me. You answer the question. He ran a hand over his head, fingers catching briefly in the short curls at the back of his neck. It was a nervous habit he'd had since he was a boy. I was going to tell you, he said finally. I swear I was. I kept waiting for the right time. I let out a humorless laugh. 7 years, and you never found a single minute? I must be busier than I thought. He looked at the floor. You remember how you used to talk about the girls I dated? He asked quietly. I frowned. What that got to do with? You remember, he insisted, meeting my eyes again. You'd say they were fast. You'd say their families were messy. You'd tell me I needed a girl from a good home, someone who didn't have baggage. The word tasted bitter, hearing it thrown back at me like that. I was just trying to protect you, I said. I didn't want you to get caught up with someone who'd drag you down. His eyes softened, but his voice stayed firm. I know that. I know you thought you were doing right by me. But Ma, do you remember what Kiera told you the first time she met you? The name hit me like cool water. Kiera, I repeated slowly. That's her mama? He nodded. Yeah, and you probably don't remember because you were busy washing dishes and pretending you weren't judging her. I felt heat rise in my cheeks. Memories shifted in my mind, pieces snapping into place now that I had the missing corner. A young woman with curly hair had come by once, years ago, to drop something off for Jamal. I'd been at the sink, hands in soapy water, listening more than looking as I heard her laugh in the hallway. I dried my hands and stepped out just long enough to see her. She'd had a small nose ring, a tattoo peeking from under her sleeve, and eyes that looked both tired and hopeful. She'd smiled at me, stuck out her hand, and said, Hi, Miss Brooks. I'm Kiera. It's really nice to finally. I had looked at her hand, then at Jamal, then back at the pile of dishes. I'd murmured something like, hum, how you doing? Without really meeting her eyes. I'd asked Jamal later, in private, she lived with her people? They seem stable? You sure about this one? He was right. I hadn't said anything overtly cruel, but I'd made her feel unwelcome. I could see that now. Ma, Jamal said, pulling me back to the present. When Kiara found out she was pregnant, she was scared. She had some stuff in her past she wasn't proud of. Some bad decisions, some rough relationships. She thought you'd see all that before you saw her. And I knew how you talked about girls like her before. So I told her. His voice cracked. He took a breath and started again. I told her I'd handle my family. I told her I'd protect her from being judged. And then when Amaya was born, I kept thinking, I'll tell Ma when she's older, when I've got more money, when we're more stable. But time kept passing, and you kept making those comments about kids these days, and tattoo girls, and single moms, and I chickened out. I didn't want you to look at my daughter and see a mistake. My eyes stung. I would never look at her like that, I whispered. His face twisted with hurt. How was I supposed to know that, Ma? You never had a kind word to say about women like Kiara. You never once said, hey, I know people go through things and still deserve love. All I heard growing up was, we got standards. Don't bring nothing messy into this house. So you're right. I should have told you. I should have trusted you more. But you gave me every reason to think you'd be ashamed of them. In the hallway, the bathroom light clicked off. We both fell silent, swallowing words we weren't ready for Amaya to hear. She trotted back into the room, wiping her wet hands on the front of her shirt. Daddy, look at this picture, she said, leaning over the album. Grandma said you used to climb the tree and she almost nailed your feet to the ground. Jamal let out a soft, broken laugh despite himself. He crossed over and stood behind her, looking down at the photo. Yeah, he said. I was a mess. You still are, I muttered, but there was less venom in it now. Amaya's eyes flicked between us again. Kids are expert weather readers. They can tell when a storm is brewing even if the sky looks clear. Did I do something wrong? She asked, quieter this time. Jamal crouched down beside her. No, baby, he said, putting a hand on her back. You didn't do anything wrong. I did. I should have brought you here a long time ago. She looked at him, then at me. Can I come here again? She asked. Grandma has funny stories about you. He and I shared a long look, an entire conversation happening in the space between us without a word spoken. This was the moment I realized. The moment where I decided what kind of woman I was going to be from here on out. The kind of mother. The kind of grandmother. I could cling to my hurt. I could yell. I could tell him he'd betrayed me. Kept me from 7 years of this little girl's life. Robbed me of first steps and first words and first birthdays. All of that would be true. Or I could look at the little girl in front of me, the one who had walked to my house because she believed her grandma might be a safe place, and choose to be that for her. Even if it meant swallowing my pride. Even if it meant facing the ugly parts of myself. Of course you can come here again, I said finally, my voice thick. You can come here any time you want, as long as your parents know where you are. This is your grandma's house. It always will be. Her smile returned, full wattage. She threw her arms around my waist, surprising me with the force of it. I patted her back, feeling the small, solid weight of her. Thank you, she whispered into my shirt. And just like that, a piece of my heart I didn't even know had gone missing slid back into place. Later that evening, after Amaya had fallen asleep on my couch with a blanket tucked around her and a cartoon still flickering silently on the TV, Jamal and I sat at the kitchen table. The overhead light buzzed softly. The house had that nighttime quiet where every creak sounded louder. He cupped a mug of coffee in both hands, though he hadn't taken more than 2 sips. I sat across from him, fingers worrying the edge of a paper napkin until it tore. So I said, tell me about her mama. He looked up, surprised. You want to know? I should have wanted to know 7 years ago, I replied. but we can only start where we are. He let out a long breath. Her name's Kiera, he said. She works as a tech at Memorial Hospital. Night shifts mostly. She's been sober for almost 9 years now. I blinked. Sober. He nodded, eyes on the swirling coffee. She had a rough run in her early 20s. Wrong crowd, wrong choices. Got herself into some trouble, nothing violent, but enough to put her on probation for a while. When she found out she was pregnant with Amaya, she went to rehab, got clean, stayed clean. She's one of the strongest people I know. I thought about all the times I'd sat in this very kitchen, watching the evening news, clucking my tongue at stories about those people messing up their lives with drugs. And you thought I'd never be able to see past all that, I said quietly. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. Has she met your daddy's side of the family? I asked. He huffed out a humorless laugh. They don't know about her either, he said. Just like they don't know about Amaya. I brought them a picture once, showed it to Aunt Denise. She said, whose baby is that? And I said, just a friend's niece. I chickened out. He met my eyes. I've been living in halves, Ma. Half the truth with you, half the truth with them, half the truth with Kiera about why I won't bring her home for holidays. I'm tired. There was again that heavy shame coating every word. Do you love her? I asked. Kiera. Yes, he said, without a beat of hesitation. I love her, and I love my daughter. I didn't know how to put those loves in the same room as you. I stared at him, remembering the young man who'd sat at this same table as a teenager, slamming his fist down and saying, "You don't understand, Ma," when I told him he couldn't go out with his friends. Back then, I had been so sure I knew best. Now, I wasn't so sure of anything. You were wrong to lie to me, I said. You were wrong to keep her from me. You robbed me of years I can't get back. You robbed her of birthdays with her grandma. That's something I don't think I'll ever stop grieving. His shoulders sagged under the weight of my words. I know, he whispered. I'm sorry. I let the apology sit in the air between us for a moment, like a fragile thing that needed space. And I was wrong too, I added quietly. I was wrong for the way I talked around you. For the way I looked down on people I didn't even know, just 'cause of what they'd been through. I thought I was raising you with standards. Maybe I was, but I was also teaching you that some people weren't worthy of our family. Like we was so perfect. God knows that's not true. His eyes shone. Ma, I messed up, I said, my own voice breaking. I made you feel like you had to protect me from your own life. Like I was some kind of judge you had to stand before instead of your mama, who loves you. I shook my head, tears slipping free. I never wanted that. But wanting something and doing it right ain't always the same thing. We sat there a long moment, both of us blinking back tears we didn't bother to hide. I reached across the table and laid my hand over his. His fingers were rough, callous from years of work, just like his daddy's had been. I can't go back and change the years we lost, I said. But I can decide what kind of grandma I'm going to be from here on out. And I can decide what kind of mama I'm going to be to a grown man who's still learning to trust me. He squeezed my hand, his thumb rubbing small circles into my skin like he was trying to soothe us both. So what now? He asked. Now, I said, glancing toward the living room where Amaya slept. Now you bring that girl and her mama over here properly. Not skulking around like thieves in the night. You tell Kiera that I'm ready to meet her for real. Not as some nameless girl I dismissed from the kitchen sink, but as the woman my son loves and the mother of my grandbaby. You sure? He asked softly. I'm scared, I corrected. I'm ashamed, but I'm sure. He nodded, swallowing hard. Okay, I'll talk to her. She's been asking about you for years, you know. Every time we drive past this side of town, Amaya points and says, that's my grandma's house. Kiera would say, one day, baby, one day. I thought about that, My house being a landmark in a life I hadn't been invited into. My walls holding a space in their story, even when I wasn't there. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry, so I did a little of both. When Kiera finally came over the following Sunday, the sky was a gentle blue and the air smelled faintly of rain, though the forecast said it would stay dry. I had spent the whole morning cooking, because that's what women in my family do when we don't know what else to say. Fried chicken, collard greens with smoked turkey, mac and cheese, cornbread, peach cobbler, the kind of spread that says, I'm trying even when the words stick in your throat. I wore a simple yellow dress and my good earrings. When I caught my reflection in the hallway mirror, I saw my mama looking back at me. The same set to the mouth, the same guarded eyes. Don't be like her, I whispered to my reflection. Be better. Jamal's truck pulled up out front. Through the lace curtain, I saw him get out, then walk around to help Amaya out of the back seat. She hopped down, wearing a little floral dress and patent leather shoes I recognized from the Easter dresses I used to buy for other kids at church. Then I saw Kiera. She stepped out slowly, smoothing her hand over her dress. She wore jeans, a simple blouse, and a light sweater. Her hair was in a neat bun today, curls tucked away, and the nose ring glinted in the sunlight. The tattoos on her arms were visible. Roses, a date, a small cross near her wrist. She looked up at the house like it was a test she hadn't studied for. I opened the door before they could knock. For a moment, we just stared at each other. Hi, she said, voice small in a way her posture didn't match. Miss Brooks. Lorraine, I corrected gently. Just Lorraine. Or whatever you feel right saying. She swallowed. I saw the way her eyes darted to the food spread out on the table behind me, the family photos on the wall, the cross above the doorway. She was taking inventory. The way people from unstable homes learn to do quickly, scanning for danger. I brought dessert, she said, lifting a bakery box a little. It's just store-bought, but we got plenty of dessert, I said. Then, before the words could turn harsh, I added, but you can't ever have too much. Come on in. She stepped past me, the faint smell of cocoa butter and laundry detergent following her. Amaya rushed inside like she'd done it 100 times before. This my grandma's house, she announced proudly. She got pictures of Daddy when he had a big head. Kiera smiled despite herself. I'd like to see those, she murmured. We gathered around the table. Jamal looked like he was watching a bomb he wasn't sure would go off or not. His leg bounced under the table until I shot him a look, and he stilled. We bowed our heads for grace. My voice trembled at first, but then settled as I thanked God for food, for family, and for new beginnings, even when they come late. After a few minutes of eating, the conversation loosened, like a muscle unclenching. I heard you work at the hospital, I said to Kiera. She nodded. Yes, ma'am. Yes. I'm a patient care tech on the night shift. It's not glamorous, but it's honest work. There's a lot of holiness in honest work, I said. Night shift ain't easy. She looked surprised, then relieved. No, she agreed with a soft laugh. It's not, but it keeps a roof over our heads. I wanted to ask about before. About the rehab, the record, the stories I'd only heard in pieces. But I knew those were her stories to tell when she was ready, not part of some interrogation she had to pass to earn a seat at my table. So instead, I said, you like cobbler? She smiled. Yes, ma'am. Good. You can take some home with you. Amaya, too. That child's already got cheeks like her daddy's. We gotta keep him full. They laughed, and some of the tension bled out of the room. Later, while Amaya played with some old dolls I dug out of the closet, Kiera and I ended up alone in the kitchen, rinsing dishes. Jamal told me what he said you've been through. I ventured carefully. Not details, just that it wasn't always easy. She stared at the dish in her hand for a moment, then set it in the drying rack. That's one way to put it, she said. I grew up bouncing between houses, between friends' couches, made some bad choices, got clean. When I found out I was pregnant, I thought, this is it. This is my second chance. But I also thought, his family's never gonna accept me. She looked at me then, straight on. I'm not asking you to ignore my past, she said quietly. I just, I just hope you'll let me prove I'm more than the worst thing I ever did. My throat tightened, because in that moment I didn't see a girl with tattoos or baggage. I saw a younger version of myself. I saw the frightened 20-year-old who'd stood on her own mama's porch, pregnant with Jamal, listening to that woman say, "You done ruined your life. Don't bring no more trouble into this house." I had spent my whole adult life trying not to be my mother, and yet somehow, in my effort to protect my son from chaos, I had become a new version of the same gatekeeper. "I owe you an apology," I said. She blinked. "For what?" "For the way I made you feel that day you came by," I said. "I remember. You walked in this house, reached out your hand, introduced yourself. I barely looked at you. I thought I was being cautious, but I was being rude, judgmental. That's not the kind of woman I want to be. And it's sure not the kind of grandma I want to be to that little girl in there." Her eyes filled with tears. She tried to blink away. "You don't have to." "Yes," I interrupted gently, "I do. I'm sorry, Kiera. I really am. I can't change that first impression, but I can work on everyone after it. If you'll let me." She took a shaky breath. Then she nodded. "Okay," she whispered. "Thank you." We stood there a moment, the water running, the clink of dishes in the background, two women from different generations meeting in the middle of the same old kitchen. "I'm not perfect," I added. "I'm going to say the wrong thing sometimes. Old habits die hard. But I'm trying to unlearn some things. 'Cause I don't want Amaya growing up thinking love is something she has to earn by being perfect." "We've all made mistakes," I continued, more to myself than to her. "We've all gone left when we should have turned right. Some of us got caught. Some of us just got lucky. The older I get, the more I believe grace is just recognizing that and choosing mercy anyway." She nodded again, tears slipping free this time. "I want her to know she got a whole village," she said, voice thick. "Not just me and Jamal. She deserves that. She's got me," I said. "For as long as I'm breathing, she's got me." Now, I wish I could tell you that everything was perfect after that. That I woke up the next day completely transformed, never judgmental again, never tempted to make some slick comment when I saw a girl in the grocery store with shorts too short and lashes too long. That wouldn't be the truth. The truth is, healing is less like flipping a switch and more like learning to walk again after you've been limping for years. You stumble. You catch yourself. You apologize. You try again. Some of my family had their own things to say when they finally found out. At a family reunion a few months later, when Jamal and Kiera brought Amaya and introduced her properly, there were whispers. Aunt Denise pulled me aside near the potato salad. "You knew about this," she hissed. "He had a baby with that girl from over on 34th? The one with the record? And you just okay with that now?" I felt that old reflex rise up in me, the urge to agree, to distance myself, to say something like, "Well, you know these boys." I told him better. Instead, I thought about Amaya's little hand in mine, about Kiera's tired eyes in my kitchen, asking for a second chance without saying the words. "No," I said calmly, surprising even myself. "I'm not okay with him lying to me for 7 years. I'm not okay with the way I talked before either. But I am choosing to love my granddaughter. And I'm choosing to treat Kiera like a human being, not a cautionary tale." Aunt Denise snorted. "You always were too soft." I smiled, a small, sad thing. "Funny. My son thought I was too hard. Maybe the truth is somewhere in the middle." When word got around, some family members showed up for Amaya's next birthday with gifts and hugs, pretending they hadn't said certain things behind closed doors. Others stayed away, holding tight to their judgments like blankets. That's the thing about breaking generational shame. It doesn't always make you popular, but it does make you free. As for me, I started collecting small moments with Amaya like pearls on a string. Her first time sleeping over when she insisted on wearing one of my old t-shirts as a nightgown and we stayed up too late watching old movies. The way she wrinkled her nose at collard greens the first time, then asked for seconds the next Sunday. The afternoon she traced the lines on my hands and said, "Grandma, your hands got maps on 'em." And I laughed until tears came. We built something, slowly. Something honest. Something that didn't depend on me pretending to be perfect or her pretending not to see my flaws. One evening, a couple of years after that first knock on my door, she sat on my porch swing beside me, watching the fireflies blink in the yard. "Grandma," she asked. "Yeah, baby. Were you mad at Daddy for not telling you about me?" I considered lying. I didn't. "Yeah," I said softly. I was. I was hurt. It made me feel like he didn't trust me. She kicked her feet gently, making the swing creak. "Are you still mad?" I thought about it, really thought. The sharp edge of my anger had worn down over time, smoothed by birthdays and school concerts and quiet evenings like this one. What was left wasn't rage. It was a scar, tender sometimes, but no longer bleeding. "No," I said finally. "I'm not mad. I'm grateful." She frowned. Grateful. If he'd told me back then, the way I was, I might have said something I couldn't take back, I admitted. I might have hurt your mama's feelings. I might have made it harder for them. I don't like that he lied, but I understand why he was scared. And I'm grateful I got the chance to do better when you showed up on my porch and called me Grandma. You gave me a second chance to be the kind of woman I always wanted to be. She was quiet for a moment, thinking that over the way only a child can deeply without all the clutter adults add to everything. "I'm glad I came," she said finally. "I was scared that day, but this is my favorite house now." I smiled, blinking up at the darkening sky. "Mine too," I said. If you're still with me after all this time, whether you're listening while you fold laundry or lying in the dark with tears in your eyes, I want to leave you with this. We talk a lot about betrayal in families, about the secrets our children keep, the lies our partners tell, the ways people disappoint us. But sometimes the betrayal isn't just what others do to us. Sometimes it's the way we betray our own values without realizing it. I thought I was raising my son to be careful, to have standards, to avoid chaos. What I was really teaching him without meaning to was that some people were too messy to deserve our love, that he had to clean up his life before he could bring it to my table. He learned that lesson so well. He hid his greatest joy from me for 7 years. I can't go back and unteach those words. I can't reclaim the baby years I missed, or the first time Amaya called someone grandma who wasn't me. But I can do this. I can show up now. I can pack an extra snack in my purse for her when she comes over, just in case. I can show up at her school plays and cheer like a fool. I can sit in my kitchen and listen to Kiara talk about her shift at the hospital without judging her for the woman she used to be. I can choose, every day, to be a safe place instead of a courtroom. So I want to ask you something. Have you ever made someone in your family feel like they couldn't bring their whole self to your table? Have your words about those people, about girls like that, about men who do this or that, built a wall you didn't intend to build? If you're brave enough, tell me your story in the comments. You don't have to use real names. Just tell the truth. Sometimes that's the first step to tearing those walls down. And if any part of my story touched you, if you felt that ache when I opened the door and saw my granddaughter, if you recognized yourself in my mistakes or my second chances, go ahead and hit that like button Share this with someone who might need it, and subscribe so you don't miss the next time I sit down and tell you another piece of my heart. Because if there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Secrets might protect us from shame for a little while, but love, real, honest, messy love, that's the only thing that can heal it.